hat. Bomb hat, bomb hat, bomb hat. I'm like, it pisses me off that Millville police uses Dodge. Like, really? Tax dollars aren't even going. My tax dollars don't even go to a domestic company. Fuck, you could have put Toyotas. You could have fucking had Toyotas, and it would have been. Oh my God. What's up, guys? Matt Manduke here. You can see I got this patriotic hat going on. I got my devil shit going on because, you know, representing Jersey. I need to talk about the history of the Chrysler company because it's been the topic of my discussion with many of my customers because they're in the surrounding areas that drive Chryslers and still buy them new. Like, they don't make it openly accessible knowledge. But remember, if you don't believe me, or Google it. Somebody probably knows. I've owned maybe 3 Chrysler products in my life. The first one was a 1993 Chrysler Concorde, and I only drove it for like 3 months. I got hit by a blind intersection. It was probably my fault. I was young. I was like 19. I didn't know any better and stuck my nose into places where it shouldn't have been. Drivingly speaking, of course. It got totaled. After it got totaled, because I was the last owner, they sent all the recalls. It got 18 recalls after it got totaled. I was so happy that it got totaled. 18 recalls involving the transmission bursting into flames and possibly killing me. This was one of their top-of-the-line luxury vehicles, the equivalent to what would be the 300 or the Dodge Charger today in 1993. Granted, I was driving it in like 1999 because I got my license in 1998. And, you know, came out of a 1992 Chevy S10 that I got, you know, 5-speed, freaking door fell off the side. Motor ran like a top without water in it. It was stupid insane, but the body fell apart because it got hit by like a 4-wheeler or something, and then taking it off road and wedging the doors and just doing dumb shit. So it fell apart. But it was my first car. I got it for $500. Was what it was. It was cool to ride around without doors and shit. But then I got the Chrysler and I got hit, you know, because didn't have the power that a smaller motor by General Motors had, and I didn't have the manual transmission power, and there's a lot of shit that I didn't have because I went for the Chrysler. But I went with it because it seemed like a good deal. It was not a good deal. I didn't get hurt in the accident, thank God, but it was probably because I was young, and you can take some hits when you're young. You can't take them when you're older. 18 recalls that causes it to burst into flames, possible life-threatening situation. That's horrible for a top-of-the-line car from their aspect. And that led me to believe that everything trickling down was just bad. Now, I wasn't quite as well-knowledged as I am now. Now, I do believe that the Jeeps up until like 96-ish were okay, because the big problem with what happened with Chrysler and why they went bankrupt the first time was because in 1996 it was a world standard in emissions that calls the OBD2, the check engine light that we know, or the service engine soon light, or whatever it is for you, that little weird thing. Many Chryslers didn't do that. Everything was supposed to be fuel-injected systems and moving into a higher wave of technology, and many Dodge Ram trucks still had a throttle body setup that was okay during the 90s. Not good, it was a crap idea, but it was like a fuel injector on top of a carburetor. But they kept selling them because they couldn't afford to develop technology that they didn't have to go, you know, keep up with the rest of the world. So what ended up happening was the United States government gave them an extra 2 years to do it, and by the end of 2 years, they still haven't developed a proper fuel injection system that they could put in their trucks, the Dodge Rams, craps. So the United States government sued them so fucking hard that they went bankrupt. By 99, the Mercedes company bought them, this bankrupt company, and they adapted to the Chrysler ways, which over between 99 and 2010, you can see a downgrade in the worth and holding value of the Mercedes. Now you see like a lot of ghetto people driving Mercedes. That's because you can go get one cheap. And that's also why you can get the BMW X5 and the BMW 320i, 328i so cheap, because those cars were built to compete with the Mercedes cars that were going for so cheap that you could get them for cheap. It's still expensive to maintain them, but the Mercedes is actually cheaper to maintain because it has Chrysler parts. The problem with that is it breaks easier. I mean, but so much cheaper to maintain either of them. Anyway, that's off the topic entirely because we're still talking about Chrysler. Well, Mercedes had the idea that Americans were completely content with, getting a car, having a car payment, and the car being worthless after they get it paid off, so they have to buy another one. And they weren't content with the idea of not having any trade-in value, but they wanted the guy who paid for the car for 5 years to immediately pay for another car for 5 years. Which is why if we actually look for Chrysler cars from the late 90s and early 2000s, they're rare. I mean, the Dodge Durangos, the Dakotas, what they had? They had like the little Chrysler Spirit cars. They had a whole slew of stuff that you never see on the road anymore. You do see them, but they're usually like the old people that bought them and they still don't drive them. They might have like 10,000 miles on them. Because the first generation Dodge Neon, that thing would burst into flames if you filled it up with gas. Actually, that was the PT Cruiser. They released it in 2000 and they had to recall it and released it again in 2001 because there was a problem with the fuel system that caused it to burst into flames. So that same problem in the fuel system was because they used neon parts in the PT Cruiser. It was a neon chassis. They just made it a little different shape. Notice you don't see a lot of PT Cruisers anymore, and they're still making them. Still. And so anyway, the slow depleting of the least fuel efficient vehicles in the world ever, and the least dependable vehicles in the world ever. I mean, this company is known for falling apart and bursting into flames while driving down the road. Now, Mercedes decided that, they were actually tired of being run into the ground by ticking into Chrysler's thoughts. So they actually sold it to the Lancia company. The Lancia company is a French company. They own companies like Fiat and Alfa Romeo. They haven't raced since 1986. They had sold a couple cars in the 80s in America, but the fact is they haven't been able to pass American safety and emission laws since like the 80s because they're best known for actually bursting into flames while driving in Europe. Don't believe me? Watch Top Gear on BBC. You can do that on YouTube. Now, I'm not saying any of this stuff to piss any of you guys off, but the equity of these cars, especially when like the Chrysler Corporation went bankrupt in 98, like I heard a guy the other day say that he had a 99 3000 GT. This was a $55,000 car. He said it got totaled today and it was worth like $700. And I was like, dude, wasn't that like a $55,000 like really super end non-race car, never been raced because Mitsubishi doesn't race. I think they might race now with the Evo. But I don't think so, because Dodge isn't in NASCAR. Dodge doesn't build trucks anymore. They lost the Cummins contract since they went under Lancia. Cummins is now a Nissan company. Great for Nissan. Nissan builds halfway decent vehicles. Much, much, much better than Dodge. But, I mean, Dodge is, if you look at Consumer Reports, and I might even be able to reference that video in the description below, or I might be able to find it, because I shared it on Facebook not terribly long ago, that, Consumer Reports, everything in the Lancia company is the worst in the world. And this is only to, like, newer vehicles. Everything is the worst in the world. Toyota's the best, but that's obvious by now. If you don't know that Toyota is better than Dodge, then... I mean, you could have had, my buddy had an SS Camaro, and he got a Toyota T100. And he actually traded them both in and lost a shit ton of money on a 2008 Jeep Wrangler. good for him. It already had a Jasper motor in it with 30,000 miles. But 30,000 miles, it already had an aftermarket motor in it. Like, really? No brainer. These things are crap. But I keep telling people they got bad oil pumps in them. They got, you know, they're designed to fall apart before you're done paying for them, because you're just going to buy another one, because why would you buy something else? You love our cars. They give you no technology options. They give you no fuel economy. I mean, Ford's building cars today. Actually, in 2010, Ford released the Ford Fusion that could actually do the lane keeping capability, which is something that only high-end BMWs and Mercedes and Lexuses did. Where, like, if you doze off of the wheel on the highway, it'll actually nudge you back into the lane. So you could feasibly set your cruise control. It has active cruise control, where, like, if a guy's going slower in front of you, it'll match his speed. You could feasibly get on the highway and take a nap. Seriously. In 2010. And this technology is still working today in 2015 in the Ford Fusion. Which is a similar price point to the Chrysler 200, but I can't even compare the two. The technology difference is so extremely different. So extremely different. Ridiculously. Let's see, in 2004, well, I mean, I can compare everything directly to my 2000 Chevy Express 1500 conversion that weighs 7,000 pounds with everything in it, because I live in it, that gets 22 miles to the gallon. Which, if I compare that to the 2015 Dodge Ram with a 5.7 Hemi, it makes 100 more horsepower and gets 10 more miles to the gallon and has a gross towing capacity of 4,000 more pounds. And I'm talking about a 15-year-old, so the GM technology is better 15 years better? Well, of course, because the Chrysler Corporation is an American. I mean, Toyota has moved to America. Honda has moved to America. Nissan has moved to America. Ford has stayed in America. General Motors builds our tanks. Of course, they have ties with American technology and the American government. They build our tanks. They're part of the military industrial complex. We rule the world. We're 20 years ahead. But, of course, Chrysler's not 20 years ahead, because how could they be? They're not American. I think it's hilarious that there's Dodge Darts running around in Millville with American flags going made in America. No, it wasn't. It was built by Mexicans, and the money went to a French company. You look like a retard for saying it's American. Really. I mean, I know that my Express was not made in America. It says Canada all over it, but you know what? I'd rather it go to, you know, American money with Canada. I think we're actually friends with Canada. The only reason why you need a passport to go and come from Canada is because, like, you can get into Canada much easier as a refugee. And America only wants... I don't want to get into the refugee thing. That's a whole other video. Yeah, I want to switch that. Alright, so anyway, we're looking at the Lancia company. Well, I'm saying that my Express 1500 from 2000 gets 22 miles to the gallon. You know the Fiat 500 gets like 26 to 28 miles to the gallon? 26 to 28 miles to the gallon. And you see how small that thing is? Look at my van tour. I can do things in my van that you'll never be able to do in a Fiat. And that Fiat was not made in Italy. It was made in Mexico. It has a Mopar engine under the hood. Mopar hasn't been worth a half a shit since I've been able to, well, no. Since I've been able to work. No, I started working when I was 16. I was 97, so no, since before that. I mean, I was a little kid when they were worthless. I like the 318. I like some of the older stuff. I like the Dana stuff. I like this CJ7s and stuff. I like the classic stuff. Of course I like a Hemi Cuda. But you know, the 5.7 Hemi doesn't even have hemispherical heads. What's worse, the 6.4 Hemi makes just as much power as the 5.7 Vortec that's in my van. Which, yeah, the 5.7 Vortec makes a little bit more power than the 5.3 Vortec that's in the Chevy 1500s. The Chevy 1500s have DOD technology, which is technology that Chrysler will never touch, because they're going to go out of business. They'll be like Saturn, where if your vehicle is like, they'll have to maintain it for 10 years and then they'll just disappear and you'll never see them again, and it'll be like, hey, that's a rare car, because they weren't dependable enough to last. I saw a 79 Toyota Corolla today, all original parts, 480,000 miles, 13-inch wheels. I had to sit on the ground and put gas in it. It's horrible. It was great though. I love that car. I got a kick out of it. Apparently there's 2 of them in the area. According to that guy, I don't know. But you know, this is I don't know any further that I can go on that. Oh, watch your equity. I'm not talking about 1 bankruptcy, 2 bankruptcy, working on 3 bankruptcy for nothing. These are the cheapest cars of their classes for a reason. They have the lowest technology of their classes for a reason. They have the lowest fuel economy of their classes and the classes beneath them for a reason. They have the lowest dependability for a reason. They're pieces of shit, and we know this. Watch your equity. If you bought a new Charger, or if you're like the Millville police that drive Dodge Chargers, like, I'm really pissed that tax dollars went to Mercedes. That's not even an American company. They could have at least, like, bought Toyotas. At least Toyota employs Americans. It's cheaper for them to do business here. And they build good cars. They get good gas mileage. I'm really happy that Toyota had a hand in the Vortex system, because that's how General Motors got through what Chrysler couldn't. That's a whole other video. So yeah, this is the last, 25 years of history of this company, and I'm wearing this hat because at least my van employed Americans. Canadians too. I'm all for, keeping as much of the money as we can here. I'm trying to help you guys keep as much of the money as you can in your pocket. And I would say, look at the Blue Book value of whatever your Chrysler is worth now. I don't care if you bought it yesterday. Look at what it's worth. And look at how quickly it's been depreciating. In fact, since the 2015s the 2016s are no different than the 2015s. Look at what if you have a 2016, look at what the 2015s are worth. Did they like drop dramatically? I saw a video, I read an article on the Hellcat. Hellcat's a piece of shit. Makes 770 horsepower. That's great, but it's not good for anything but straight lines. There's no other car in the world being produced right now other than, pro street drag. But there's nothing else coming off the lot that is completely worthless except for straight lines. You mean to tell me that they built the Hellcat to compete with like a 72 Chevelle SS with a 454? I mean, that was 50 years ago. And it gets less gas mileage than that 454, and it can't pull wheelies like that 454, and it can't drift and corner like that 454 either. Like, you're still not good enough than 50 years ago? This thing is not going to hold any value. If you're buying a Hellcat, I'm sorry for you, man. If you're buying a Hellcat, I will race you with my van. Not for pigs, because well, yeah, if we do a circuit, I'll race you with my van, and I'll drift better than you, and I'll beat you. How bad is that? You want to get beat by a van with a kayak on top? A conversion van that used to have a handicap lift on it? Oh, you horrible people. So anyway, the point is, the more Americans that buy these cars, the more it proves that Americans are stupid. The whole idea of me doing this free information thing is to prove that we're not all stupid, because I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. If you don't believe these facts, Google it. You're on the internet. I'm not going to pay somebody else to check who... You're on the internet. Google it. If you don't believe me, Google it. I'm sure you can find it somewhere else. I just happen to know this stuff because I've spent years and years working in the automotive industry. And, I'm pumping gas now. I worked at AutoZone. I worked at Advance. I might be working at Pep Boys. I don't know. I don't know if I'd rather do that than pump gas. I like talking to people, and I think it's good advertisement. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.